Hi guys, thanks for joining me again. This week we're looking at part whole problems again. Last week we were interested in those problems where we didn't know the whole amount. This week we're interested in those problems where we don't know one of the parts. Okay, let's start by getting you thinking. Here we've got a problem involving Han and Leia. It says Han had £423. He spent £285 in paint for the Millennium Falcon, and Han wants to work out how much money he's going to have left. Han reckons he'll need to take away 285 from 423 just like this to solve it, whereas Leia reckons that's not true. There are lots of ways to solve this problem. So once again, I want you to pause the video for 2 to 3 minutes and I want you to discuss your thoughts with a partner. I want to know who you agree with and can you justify your thoughts by giving reasons. Do you think it's always true, sometimes true, or never true that Han has to calculate the answer just as he's suggesting? Okay, hopefully you've been able to discuss your ideas with a partner, you've heard the thoughts of other groups, and you've been able to justify your opinions by giving reasons. In my opinion, it's Leia that's correct. There are lots of ways to work this problem out without performing a calculation like the one Han's suggesting, so I'm saying it's never true. We can work it out this way, but there are always alternative strategies we can use instead. The most important thing here though isn't that you agree with me, it's that you're able to give reasons and justify why you think the way you do. Before we get to investigating a problem this week, I've got a little activity I'd like you to have a go at with a partner. You can name yourselves Player 1 and Player 2. Now, for this activity, you'll need 2 pieces of card or paper and some place value counters or base 10 materials. What I'd like you to do is Player 1, you're going to choose a number and you're going to use the resources to make that number. Now, for a mild challenge, I want you to use 10s and 1s and I want you to use less than 10 of each to make that number. So for example, you might make the number 87 using 8 10s and 7 1s. For a spicy challenge, I'd like you to use hundreds, 10s and 1s, and again, I'd like you to use less than 10 of each. So for example, to make the number 182, you'll use 100, 8 10s and 2 1s. For the extra hot challenge this week, I want you to use hundreds, 10s and 1s again, only this time you're going to use more than 10 1s. So for example, if I wanted to make the number 262, I would use 200s, 5 10s and 12 1s, so that I've got more than 10 1s. That's going to make it a bit more difficult. Now that you've done that, Player 1, you've made the number, what I would like you to do is close your eyes. Player 2, what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to take some of that number, so some of the hundreds, 10s and the 1s, and I'd like you to place them on top of the first piece of card, and then the remainder, whatever's left, I'd like you to place underneath the second piece of card. Now once you've done that, let Player 1 know that you're finished and they can then open their eyes. And Player 1, what I want you to do is, can you work out how many of those counters, how much of that number has Player 2 hidden from you? Now, in order to do that, you can use other resources to help you. You can use your fingers, but what I'd like you to do is have a think about what strategy is that you're actually using to work this out. Good luck. Okay, it's time to get investigating with a partner. We've got another Star Wars related problem again this week. Sorry for those of you who don't like Star Wars, I promise it will be a different theme next week. And here we've got a battle between the Rebels and the Empire. And as you can see, it says the Empire starts a battle with 342 TIE fighters. The Rebels managed to destroy 178 of them during the battle. And what we want to know is how many TIE fighters survived the battle. As you can see, we've got a part whole problem again, only this time we don't know one of the parts. Now remember, the answer is not the most important thing here. What's more important is that you can use a strategy to solve it and you can explain how you did that by making your thinking visible. So what I'd like you to do once again is pause the video for 8 to 10 minutes and with your partner use the resources to help you solve it, and I want you to draw pictures and diagrams to explain what you did, to make that thinking visible. Can you find different ways to work this out? And once you've done that, I want you to share some of those strategies with the rest of the class. Okay, hopefully you've had a go at that, you've been able to work that out, you've used the strategy, you've maybe even come up with more than one strategy, and you've been able to share those strategies with the rest of the class. Once again, there are lots of ways we can work this out. I'd like to take you through 3 different possibilities. Let's begin by looking at one possible strategy that we could use to solve this. Now, I know that the whole amount is 342, so I'm going to begin by putting out 342 using the hundreds, the tens and ones. And at the same time, I'm also going to use a number line to record what I'm doing. So I'm going to put that 342 at the end of my number line. Now, I know that 178 of those TIE fighters were destroyed. So I know that if I take 178 away from the 342, I'll be left with the number of surviving TIE fighters. Now, I can't do that in one go. I don't know what 342 take away 178 is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break that down into parts in order to make that easier. Now, I can do this in any order, but I'm going to start by taking away 100. I'm now left with 242 TIE fighters, but I know that I've not got the full 178 that were destroyed. So the next thing I might do is I could take away those 2. And if I take away those 2, I'm now down to 240. What could I do next? Well, I've got those 4 tens there, so let's take away those. When I take away those, I get down to 200. And now I've hit a problem because I know that I need 178 there altogether. So I've only got 142 so far. So what am I going to do? Well, I can take one of those hundreds and I can exchange that for 10 tens. I've still got 200 there. Rather than having 2 hundreds, I've got 100 and 10 tens. Now what I can do is I can take away 30 of those. And if I take away 30, I'm now down at 170. I've still not got all the TIE fighters that I need. I needed 178. So far, I've only got 172. So what do I need to do now? I need another 6. Once again, I don't have 6 ones there to take away. So I'm going to exchange. I'm going to take one of those 10s and I'm going to exchange that for 10 ones. Now that I've done that, once again, I've still got the same number. I've got 170. I've just got it as 100, 6 tens and 10 ones. Now I can take away the 6 that I need. And when I take away the 6 that I need, I'm left with 164. So we can see there that I started with the 342, I've taken away 178 in total, and I'm left with 164. So I now know there are 164 surviving TIE fighters. And that strategy that we used there was subtraction or takeaway. I couldn't do it all in one go. It didn't really matter the order that I did it in, as long as I can explain the steps that I went through in order to get to my final answer. Let's have a look at an alternative strategy. This time I'm not going to start with the whole amount. This time I'm going to start with the part that I know, and I know that 178 TIE fighters were destroyed during the battle. So I'm going to put out 178 once again using the hundreds, tens and ones, and I'm also going to put that at the start of my number line. Now, I know that altogether there are 342 TIE fighters. So whatever I add to 178 is going to get me to 342. So I'm going to put that at the end of my number line. And what I need to do now is I need to think, what do I need to add onto 178 in order to get to 342? And again, I can't do that in one jump, so I'm going to do that in parts. We can do this in any order. I might decide to add 100 first to get up to 278. I could add 10 first to get up to 188, but I'm going to start by adding 2. And the reason I'm adding 2 is because it gets me up to 180. It gets me up to a friendlier number than 178. Now, once I'm at 180, I might think to myself, well, what's a friendlier number that I can get to? And if I add 20, I'm now up at 200. Now, once I'm at 200, I've actually made it really easy for myself, because from 200 to 342, I might be able to do that in just one jump, or I might, as I've done here, add 100 to get to 300, and then I might add 40 to get to 340, and then add the 2 to get to 342. I can see that now I've got all the TIE fighters that I knew started the battle. 178 of them are destroyed, and I've added on the surviving TIE fighters. I added on 2, and then 20, and then 100, then 40, and then 2, and if I add that all together, I get exactly the same answer as before. I get 164 TIE fighters that survived that battle. And that strategy that we used there was counting on. Okay, so let's have a look at one last strategy today. Now, to begin with, I'm going to go back to that whole amount of 342. So I'm going to use the Dean's materials once again, the base 10 materials, to put out 3 hundreds, 4 10s and 2 1s. And I'm also going to show that in my number line. That's the whole amount, so I'm going to put that at the end of my number line. Now, unlike before, where we took 178 away from 342, we used subtraction to work it out. This time, we're going to see how much do we need to take away from 342 in order to get down to 178. So I'm going to put 178 at the start of my number line. So just like before, I can't do this in one step. I'm going to do this in parts in order to make it easier for myself. Now, from 342, if I want to get down to 178, I could begin by counting back those 42. And when I count back 42, I'm now left with 300 at the top there, you can see. What might I do next? Well, I might decide to count back another 100. And the reason I've counted back 100 is it gets me down to 200. I've still not reached 178, and I've got a little bit of a problem here. I'm only left with 200s. Now, just like we did before, we can take one of those hundreds and we can exchange it for 10 10s. We're not changing the number in any way. We've still got 200 there. We've just got 100 and 10 10s to represent that. Now that I've done that, I might count back 20, because if I count back 20, that gets me down to 180, and you can see I've still not reached 178. How many more do I need to count back? I need to count back a further 2. And just like before, we can exchange one of those 10s for 10 1s. Still got 180 there, but this allows us to count back that 2 that we need. So let's put that down there, and that's us down to 178. So we can see we're left with the 178 that we knew were destroyed during the battle. And what we've counted back in order to leave us with that was the 42, the 100, the 20, and the 2. And of course, when we add that all up, we get the same as the last two strategies. We get an answer of 164 TIE fighters survived the battle. And the strategy that we used there was similar to subtraction, only this time we counted back from 342 down to 178 in order to get our answer. As a class, I'd like you to decide on a strategy and have a think about how you achieved success. What were the steps that you went through in order to get that correct answer, so that you could apply that same success criteria to any problem for that particular strategy? Okay, so I'm going to have a think about the steps that I went through in order to solve that problem using one of those strategies. So to begin with, when we solve any problem, the first thing we need to do is we need to analyse the problem. We need to understand what it is we're actually being asked in the first place. And just like last week, I really did that for you because I provided that bar to represent the relationship between the total number of TIE fighters, those that were destroyed during the battle, and those that survived the battle. So we've got another part whole problem, as you can see, only this time we don't know one of the parts. Now, once I've analysed the problem, the next thing I need to do is decide on which strategy I'm going to focus on. So I'm going to choose counting on. Now, when we counted on, the first thing that I did was I started at the part that I knew. So I'm going to put that at the start of my number line. I started at the 178, and when we count on, the next thing we need to do is we need to think about counting on to that whole amount. We counted on to the 342. Now, I couldn't do that in one go. I had to use jumps in order to help me, and I used friendly numbers. So I started at 178 and I got to 180. That was a friendlier number. Then I got to 200 by adding 20, and there, at that point, I added 100 to get to 300, then 40 and 2 to get to 342. So the last thing that I had to do here in order to work out how many surviving TIE fighters there were, I needed to add up those jumps. I needed to add the 2, the 20, the 100, the 40 and the 2, and that gave me an answer of 164 surviving TIE fighters. Okay, so it's time for you to try that out. Can you apply that strategy in order to solve the problems that you can see in front of you? Once again, we've got mild, spicy and extra hot problems. I want you to have a go at one set of problems, so just 3 questions. If you can do that, I want you to have a go at making up 3 problems for someone else to solve. Now, those problems, once again, aren't set in a context. It's just those bars where you know one of the parts and you know the whole amount. So let's think about setting those in a problem, setting it in a context to make sense of it. So if I was doing the first mild problem, for example, I'm not just going to see the 78, the question mark and the 125. I'm going to set that in a problem. I'm going to give it a context. So let's imagine that I've got £125 altogether. I spend £78 on a new jacket and I want to know how much money I've got left. When you're making up those problems, you can do the same. You can either just draw the bars as they are, putting in the numbers where you know one of the parts and the whole amount, or you can write a word problem where your partner then has to analyse the problem and draw the bar for you. Okay, so hopefully you get on okay with that. You were able to solve those, you were able to apply a strategy that we've looked at today. Now what I'd like you to do is reflect on the following questions. What have you learned today? What did you find easy or difficult? Did you get stuck? What helped you when something got tricky? What did you need more help with? What is really making you think? And what are your next steps? It's really important that we do this because this is going to give us a sense of where we are with our learning now and what do we have to do next in order to develop an understanding of this particular strategy. The last thing I'm going to ask you to do today is, can you apply what you've learned? So, as a class, I want you to have a think about the following problem, discuss your ideas and see if you can solve it together. Chewbacca goes to the cinema with £33.45 in his wallet. He spends £25.67 on his ticket and snacks, and we want to work out how much money does Chewbacca have left. So have a think about the strategy that we've used today. Can you apply that in order to solve this problem? And once you've done that, have a think about the following problem. How much did he spend on snacks if the cinema ticket costs £8.95? Thanks for taking part this week. Hopefully you found that useful and you learned something new. I'll be back again next week where we're going to be looking at part whole problems again, only this time we're going to be analysing those problems. Therefore, we might not know the whole amount, we might not know one of the parts. We're going to need to analyse in order to work that out. I'll see you then.